Hi, everybody. We've got Matt Stancato here with Guild Mortgage Lending. And as always, I'm Megan, and we're going to talk about some common questions that we both get asked around being a first-time home buyer. And so, a lot of people feel like they need to have large sums of money saved, put aside, specific income, and even credit scores, which, of course, all of these things play a role in getting pre-qualified to make a purchase. We'd like to address some of those big questions that we get often. So I'm going to kick it over to Matt. Matt,
Mhm.
we're going to go through a hypothetical $400,000 house, Chester
Okay.
County, PA, average taxes scenario to run some numbers.
Okay. It sounds good to me. Well, the first thing that you were talking about is the first thing that I recall you talking about there was FICO scores, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of people think that you have to have a FICO score, a minimum of 720 in order to qualify. So the reality of it is, as any sort of a buyer, but as a first-time home buyer especially, there are products that are designed to offer you options all the way down to about a 600 credit score. Now you can find a 580, a 620, depending on the program you're looking for, but you can have credit down to about that level and still be an acceptable candidate for purchase. There might be some restrictions, there might be some pricing adjustments, but something that most good mortgage lenders will offer as well is the opportunity to improve your credit. We don't offer that service personally, but we do have several companies that we partner with. We don't make any money from them. They're just people that we like, and they will help you raise your score to the point where it's no longer an impediment to your pricing either. So there's a lot of ways to deal with both of those things, but it doesn't have to be as high as most people think it has to be.
Awesome. Yeah. And let's talk about hypothetically like cost, right? So we got this $400,000 house, closing cost, let's say $10,000. Some people think that when it comes to down payment, there's some myths around, well, do I put 20% down? Do I put 5% down? And unless you know what loan product you are qualified for and geared towards, you might think on a $400,000 house, 20% down, you need $80,000. That is not true. And you can confirm this, but you can go conventional and put 5% down, or FHA and put 3.5, which could look like 20,000. Now follow me here. I'm not trying to lose you guys. I just said $20,000. No, I don't think you have to have $20,000 necessarily to buy. We're going to bring it back. But Matt, does that sound right to you?
Yeah, there's a lot of different options that you have. First of all, conventional loans go all the way down to a 3% down payment. So when you're talking about a $400,000 house, that's $12,000. But there's plenty of options to help you make up that $12,000 if you don't happen to have it. You're allowed to use a gift from a family member that can qualify. You're allowed to borrow from retirement, usually without penalty, to purchase a home that can qualify. You're allowed to have seller assist or a lender credit or a broker's assist or anything else that you negotiate in order to help offset that kind of a cost. And as well, especially for first-time home buyers, there are special programs that offer second mortgages that are not repayable on a monthly basis. So a 97% first mortgage, for instance, a 5% second mortgage for a total of 102% financing. The 5% portion gets paid off when you sell the home. And that would be a way for you to reduce costs out of pocket as well. So you can stack these things in a lot of cases. And so you can find yourself with a 97% first mortgage, a 5% second mortgage, a 3% seller's assist, and a $400,000 house winds up costing you $8,000 out of your pocket.
Thank you. That's exactly where I was going with this.
Yep.
Because, we also have this conception that you need to make $150,000 a year to qualify. The buyer agency, I have to pay my realtor, and realtor fees are 3%, and that could look like $12,000 that goes to the brokerage. And you
Mhm.
might be sitting here going, wow, where is this money coming from? I don't know how anybody buys a house. This is the feedback that I've gotten from many of my peers and friends who just don't understand the process and how this works. You hit on stacking these items. And
Mhm.
that's where you want to get a good mortgage lender, a good realtor to sit here and explain to you, we can stack a lot of these items on top of each other to get you in the
Absolutely.
door for as little as possible. And it doesn't make you a weak buyer in the process either. So I think that's really important to emphasize.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I think there's also a change on your side, however, which was the new buyer's compensation. I'm not quite sure how that works. So how would that change things for the buyers, if at all?
Sure. So it really doesn't change anything. It's more about transparency. So typically speaking, the buyer brings a lot to the table as far as purchasing, putting a lot of money up, and the seller generally has more equity when they're selling and more funds to help pay costs. So, for example, somebody wanted to buy the house for 400,000, and let's say my brokerage fees are 12,000. The offer would be 412,000. So the seller was never really paying the fees.
Mhm.
It was always being deducted in the offer.
I
Now,
see.
what it looks like is a little bit more transparency, right? We have something called seller assist, and then we have the co-op, or what the seller's offering to the co-oping broker, cooperating buyer agent, if you will.
Yes.
And for more clarity around how that process works, we've updated some paperwork, we've separated the two. So now it's actually better as the buyer, because not only can you get a 3% seller assist to closing costs, you can also get a cooperating buyer agency to pay your
Uh,
buyer agent's fees. Okay? Are we following?
yeah, it's always been an option to do it this way. It's just now it's just displayed in a different fashion.
Exactly. It's just
Okay.
that, like, as agents in this space, we've always known that this is kind of how we've operated, but it's actually better because typically when we would do the cooperating broker, it would just be tied into the 3%.
Okay. Right.
Now the buyer has the ability to get more out of the seller, frankly. So even though there were a lot of sellers who kind of pushed this issue of wanting to understand how they were paying out the buyer agency,
Mhm.
ironically enough, it actually benefits the buyer more than it did the seller changing the contracts, because it created an opportunity for not only them to get the 3% buyer agency as well.
You see, and that's not something I've heard from a whole lot of agents. That is a way to look at this and a way to leverage this that I've not heard everybody present. So I
Because you
think
can think
it's
about it
yeah,
this way. You guys, if you're looking at a conventional loan, you can get up to 3% seller assist.
sure.
I can get an additional 3% in a buyer agency. So you can get a total
Gotcha.
of 6% in assist in the purchase.
That is the case. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things out there as well as far as grant programs.
Mhm.
And when you're working with a grant program, you have to be careful about a couple of things. This is a way, especially if you're a first-time home buyer, to get what is essentially free money towards buying a house. We've talked about this before, but
Yeah.
grant programs, especially, tend to be either not really grants; they're soft second mortgages, like I was talking about before,
Yeah.
or a grant program is a true grant program, and those are usually either demographically or geographically restricted. So you have to
Right.
make sure, and sometimes they have rules like you have to do home buyer counseling, and that's fine if you're getting 10,000 free dollars. That seems like a fair trade to me. Um,
Sure.
or you have to do a certain number of hours of online education, or whatever it might be that you have to complete for them. Just make sure that you're doing it in the order you need to. For example, if you're buying in Philadelphia, there's something called the Philly First Grant, which is up to, I think it's $12,000, something like that, toward the purchase of a home. But in order to be eligible, you have to have done the education prior to putting in an agreement for whatever home you're going to put it in for. And if you get it wrong, you forfeit your opportunity for those funds. So make sure you fully understand and research, or talk to a professional about any program that you're interested in. Hey, guitar. Any program that you're interested in using, um, because you want to make sure that whatever grant program you pick, it's applicable to the property and the region that you're looking at.
Right, absolutely. So I'm going to throw up some numbers here. I'm going to kind of break it down. We're going to talk about worst case scenario in your head. The average person is probably thinking that they have to bring somewhere between like 42 to $60,000 to close. We're here to break it down for you, break down some numbers, these scenarios. Like we talked about, stacking these products on top of each other, whether you're using a grant or not, getting the seller assist, getting the co-op assist, getting in with as little down as possible. Breaking it down, it could look like potentially $8,000 to bring to the table at closing.
Let's do the quick math in our heads here. I have a
Yeah.
real off the cuff. We have a $400,000 sales price, right?
Yep.
Yep. And then we're going to have ourselves a let's say 4% of the sales price in sellers in closing costs. That seems about right
Okay.
to me. So
hmm
that's $16,000 in closing costs right there.
Yep.
You're then going to have whatever your initial escrow account deposit is. That's probably another $8,000, give or take, at that price point.
Yep.
maybe a little less, but we'll call it $8,000. So your total acquisition cost here is $424,000.
Mhm.
So now we take a note of that because our ADHD brain will forget that while we go on and do something else. And we take a 400 and we say, okay, we're going to get a 97% first mortgage is $388,000.
Mhm.
We're going to get a 5% second mortgage,
Mhm.
which is $20,000.
Mhm.
And then we are going to get ourselves 3% seller's assist, which is $12,000.
Uh-huh.
And now we're looking at 388,000 plus $20,000 plus $12,000 is 420 with total acquisition cost of 424. Now, with the caveat that some of these programs require a minimum down payment, and with the understanding that you're not allowed to get any money back at closing, the best you can do would be zero, and that would be a rare thing to get to. You're looking at a $400,000 purchase for round about $5,000.
And didn't even take into consideration that the buyer agency will also be paid by
You're
the
right.
seller.
I didn't even mention that.
It would still be 5,000, right? Because the buyer agency would be included in there. Buyer agency would be anywhere from 2.5% to 3%. You would get that tacked in, but ultimately you could get in the door nonetheless, same numbers as you mentioned, $5,000. Now tell me who wouldn't want to buy a $400,000 house with $5,000 in their bank account?
And the most wonderful thing about it is in Chester County and the surrounding region, the consistency of appreciation of home values is so robust that you're even though you're getting into a loan for a relatively low down payment, you're not likely to see yourself in any kind of negative equity position at any point during the transaction, or the holding of the loan. So again, like Warren Buffett says, I think the only bad time to buy something that appreciates is yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for somebody who's looking like, okay, that sounds fantastic, but like how much income? Like what should my salary or annual income look like to qualify for something like this?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And now you're getting into a whole bunch of variables where you're going to want to talk to me or someone like me in order to get the actual details on this. But um, really, the thing to think about is not so much what you can, not so much how much house you can afford, as it is what your monthly spend is going to be. That's how mortgage guys think. We say,
Right.
okay, what's your gross monthly income? And then we
Mhm.
divide that by roughly two. And we say that's how much money you're allowed to spend per month on everything that you're required to spend money on. And when I say
Right.
required, I mean just credit stuff, stuff where you've already borrowed the money, a mortgage, a car payment, a student loan, a credit card, something like
Yeah.
that. Your electricity wouldn't count because for whatever reason, I guess they think you can do without it, if you so choose. Um, so you put all that stuff together and you say, okay, so if you make $10,000 a month, then $5,000 is your number, and then you say, okay, I can spend $5,000 a month on everything. So now you take a look at your own financial situation and you say, okay, do I have $1,500 a month in debt, or do I have $50 a month in debt? The answer to that question changes a lot about what you qualify for. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
I guess let me rephrase my question. Let's
okay,
say you've got somebody who's got zero debt. They paid cash for their car. They don't have any credit cards. Their credit score is a 650,
mhm.
so it's mid. And let's say they make, 70,000 a year. Hypothetically, would this be a scenario where, they could potentially qualify and they should contact a professional, of course, but we're running all of this off of hypotheticals to give people an idea of put this into perspective, right? Take it out of the atmosphere of I don't know, it's up in the cloud and get it down to like, hey, let's get realistic. Let's see what is possible.
I'll give you the back of the napkin calculation that I just did in my head, right?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah, absolutely.
75,000, which is $75,000 is what this person's making per year. You divide that by 12, you get 6250. We work with gross numbers. If we worked with net numbers, all of our percentages would just be different.
Okay.
So that's 6250 divided by 2 is 3125. If you have no other debt and you can spend 3125 a month just on your mortgage, if you look at that and you look at a $400,000 price point, you're very, very much in the realm of being able to afford that on $75,000 a year. Now, all of that, if you have two incomes, of course, all the better. So most people, there's a lot that is right about the relative how do I want to say this? There's a pessimistic feeling about the market in younger generations right now. I'll never be able to afford what my parents and my grandparents could afford. That's fundamentally, I think, incorrect. It might be a slower move, and it might be, a longer term project, but it certainly is not beyond most people's reach. There are a lot of things working against first time home buyers in this market. And that is why we take advantage of all of these programs in order to mitigate that cost to you and make it and get you into the pool. You can't make money on equity. You can't put yourself in a long term financial position to gain wealth unless you're investing either in real estate or in something with equal return possibility. Real estate's generally easier because you got to live someplace anyway. Um,
Absolutely.
so you want to pay attention to that. There's a lot of possibility out there in this market, and it's a great time to get into it.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why I wanted to have this conversation with you today to address that kind of that pessimism that I'm feeling from the younger generation, that frustration around, well, I don't even know where to start. I don't know how to start. I don't know if I can. And the reality is, hopefully, these numbers being shared with you today show you that it is possible and you probably can. And if there's something that we need to work on, we can have a conversation about credit. We can talk about the specifics. But hopefully, this was really encouraging conversation for anybody watching who's
Yeah.
like,
Oh, and let me throw something in since we're talking about the younger generation. You do
yeah,
not. There are very many ways to calculate student loan payments. You don't necessarily have to calculate it based upon what you actually pay. You can calculate it based upon a projected minimum payment based upon some calculation depending on your program. So if
mhm,
you have one of those, like me, giant student loan debts that doesn't seem to be going anywhere, yes, it's a pain in the butt in real life. It does not preclude you from buying a home. And the government has instituted several rules to make that more possible.
absolutely. And I also just want to share in the tail end of this, we're talking about stacking all of these things together to benefit you as a first time home buyer. And there may be some questions going in the person's mind about, well, am I a strong buyer? Am I going to get beat out? Who wants to accept these terms? And I just want to say that the market has been shifting. I've been saying this for months now, where I'm seeing more seller assists. I'm seeing people paying the buyer agency co-op, and I'm seeing these things. So please don't feel that you would be considered a weak buyer going in with all of these terms. I literally just closed 2 deals last 24 hours, seller assist, buyer agency co-ops included. Believe me, it's definitely possible in this market. So that is why I wanted to share this, because I think it's important information. I think Matt shared some really important information with me, with you guys. And I love that. So thank you so much for your
You're
time,
very
for your
welcome.
back of the
This was a great
napkin
one.
example.
Not a problem at all. Hey, if you wanted to touch, I knew we talked earlier, you wanted to touch just a little bit on rates and what's happening there. Um, a lot of noise and very little actual movement. So a lot of volatility around a central line. We've been up 25 basis points, we're down 25 basis points. We've clawed back most of what we lost, but we're still on the negative side overall. Now that the tariffs are on pause and the world is figuring out what the next thing looks like, there's going to be, I think, a relative lull in rate movements until that gets figured out. What happens next determines what direction the rates go. But there is, whether you think Jerome Powell is doing a good job or not, or whether the criticism of him is warranted, which I do not think that it is. Um, the You can make the argument that the Fed should be more forward looking when talking about rate cuts. And when you have the number of rate cuts projected during the year, that number, despite all of the criticism of Powell at this point, is still three. Now it is behind what's happening with the ECB and the European Central Bank cutting rates, but they're ostensibly attempting to raise money to continue military support, which we wanted to discontinue. So I think there's a lot of things in motion right now, which eventually end with the Fed saying, there's the market slowdown that we expected. All the pieces are in place. Now let's kick this thing down just little by little and try to land as soft as possible. So yeah, and I want to be specific. I didn't mean no criticism of Powell is justified. I've been upset with decisions he's made many times. I meant this one particular set of decisions. He does seem to be, if I want to be fair to the other side as well, he does seem to be making the inflationary cause, the primary cause, which he wants to address. Whereas traditionally, most Fed chairs have thought of unemployment and inflation as two sides of the coin, where neither one needs to get primogeniture over the other.
Mhm.
But it looks like what he's saying is that right now, at least, the primacy needs to be given to inflation. And I think because Trump wants rates down, that is what is causing the friction. So it's all well and good that we have an independent Fed, and I think we're eventually going to get where we need to go.
Absolutely. And just reiterating, we may not see a whole lot of movement. I'm summarizing in the
Oh yeah,
rates that are
you feel
significant
free to
up.
cut all that. I got off on a high horse there.
No, no, it's great. We may not see a lot of movement up or down in the next, 90 days is pretty much what we're saying, or 60 days. But ultimately, we are still positioning ourselves for that stochastic decline over the next 2 years, which makes it arguably a good time to buy counterintuitively, because I just highlighted all of the potential items you could get from the seller to help with your buy and your purchase, and then a refinance in a year or two, and you'll be feeling really good with some equity in your home and a lower mortgage payment and putting
Way
it
to get
towards
yourself
something.
kickstarted. Whatever you want. So
Yeah,
I agree. I think that it's this next couple of months is going to be um, upward growth months for the real estate market. So if you've been out there as
yeah.
well, waiting in the wings, waiting for stuff to come back, what I saw as of last month was that we have had 2 consecutive months of increasing houses on the market to about 3%, which I thought was a really good looking number. So
Last week when I had talked with you, I said that I was looking for specifically certain markets myself in the
mhm.
multifamily space, because the single family, we are seeing lots more listings come on, which is very encouraging. But I was looking for specific markets that are a little bit more affluent, a little tighter to get into those markets. And to say that I am seeing those multifamilies come on in that space personally is a really good indicator to me that the
Yeah,
market is healthy, and that there are more listings coming, more opportunities. Um, and I am under contract on a deal for 10,000 less than listed, in conjunction with the seller assist and then paying the buyer agency. So I hope that if you're hearing that and you understood what I just said, very encouraging information. So
because remember that sellers, it might seem counterintuitive, as Megan said, that you can get a lot of seller help right now, but sellers have a lot of equity right now. It's easy for a seller to cut a $10,000 check to make a problem go away. It's a little, it's a lot easier than it was, when you're right on what your mortgage is, as far as what you're selling your house for. So I've been seeing more sellers assist and more creative financing as well.
absolutely. Well, appreciate your time.
Of
Thanks so
course,
much.
happy to do it.
All right.
All
Enjoy the
right, talk
week.
to you soon.